Last but definitely not least, our next speaker is the founder of Apex Acoustics based in UK. Please give a warm welcome to Jack Harvie-Clark, who will talk about designing for acoustic satisfaction in open plan offices. Thank you very much.
Yes. Okay, great. That was a bit shocking, that last one. It's not working, is it? Yeah, thank you. I wasn't sure. That was a bit shocking, that last presentation, wasn't it? So we're just about to lose our jobs doing acoustic design. Don't worry, I've got a new job for you. Designing for acoustic satisfaction in open plan offices. AI can't do this yet. This is going to be a challenge for us. This is a journey. I'm going to show you why it's challenging, but why I think we need to do it. And you are absolutely the right people to do it. We know that offices are failing. Leesman Index, which you heard about before, the world's biggest survey of workplace experience, has been telling us for 10 years that satisfaction with noise is really important for productivity. Noise is really important for productivity, but satisfaction with noise levels is very low. So this is the problem for us to address, as Valtteri said. I'm going to start with a case study of acoustic success, because we don't get many of those, do we? So this was a big transformation project from old ways of working like this, people with assigned desks at rows of desks, to new ways of working where nobody had an assigned desk. They just had to find the right place to suit the work they were doing. So in this redesign, they didn't change the ceiling, they didn't change the lighting, they didn't change the ventilation, but it was a strong change management program. They did lots of staff surveys, and they found out that people were much more satisfied with the acoustics in the new office. So our job, we weren't involved in the design, there were no acousticians involved in the design. They said, can you come and measure the acoustics of this new office and tell us what it is, so we can write that in our specification and reproduce it, without us now in the future as well. So we said, great, what a great job. So we went and measured everything we could. We measured the empty offices, the ISO3382 Part 3 indicators. And we measured occupied conditions, ambient noise, and liveliness. So liveliness is proposed by Tom Bruhus, who's in the audience here. It's to characterize the acoustic conditions in activity-based working offices. It's a combination of noise level and fluctuation strength. And guess what? We couldn't measure any difference. All the indicators were almost exactly the same for both unoccupied conditions and occupied conditions. So our tools were blunt. So this was embarrassing and eye-opening, because the people could tell that the acoustics were much better. They were much happier with the acoustics in the new office. In fact, it wasn't just the acoustics. They were more satisfied with the lighting. They didn't change the lights. More satisfied with the thermal conditions. Hadn't changed the heating ventilation system. And more satisfied with the acoustics. We can benchmark these against the Leesman global scores. So the lighting and the heating were on the global averages. But the acoustics, people were already much more satisfied with the acoustics. This might be, they've asked the question slightly differently, because Leesman say, are you satisfied with noise? And the question here is, are you satisfied with the acoustics? So people will probably answer that slightly differently. But even if you look at the Leesman Plus, this is the highest performing workplaces worldwide, only get an average of 45% satisfaction with the acoustics. So this is remarkable acoustic success. That not only did they have no acousticians involved in this, but we couldn't explain to them why it was good. Yeah. We've got a job to do, haven't we? So this, I think, is the best example of the value of control for people in their office environment. So you can read that paper there, the report's on our website if you want to have a look at it. Should we have known this before? Well, if we look in the psychological literature, control's not just a nice to have, it's a fundamental essential for our environmental comfort, to have a sense of control over our environment. If we look in the other building services literature about environmental comfort, it's well established. They know that control is very important for environmental satisfaction. But we don't really take account of this in acoustics, do we? Why not? So you've seen this already today, so you know this. So the only statistically significant descriptor of percentage of people who are highly disturbed by noise is the distraction distance. But there's a lot of scatter in the data there, isn't there? It's not enough by itself, as Juan said earlier. There's one clue in here already that the authors included in here. So these 4 offices are either activity-based offices or there's a protected quiet area. So people have a bit more control in these offices than they do in the other offices. The office we've just been looking at has maybe moved like that across this diagram, something. So entirely under our radar. So what we need is a new model, a new framework that describes human response to sound in its entirety, not just in little bits. That's quite ambitious, isn't it? But fortunately, someone's done that for us. We have the soundscape framework. That's what this does. So when we think about the room acoustics, which are still important, by the way, I'm not negating the importance of the room acoustics. They operate on this channel, as does the acoustic space planning, which we've seen in the last few presentations, how important the acoustic space planning is. But the larger part of this diagram is given over to the context and the importance of that for our responses and the outcomes. We can understand the context as the non-acoustic factors, which are described as personal, tangible, or psychosocial. This is just categorizing the non-acoustic factors. Most of the work about non-acoustic factors at the minute is going on for aviation noise. And they tell us that 1/3 of the variance in the noise annoyance is due to the acoustic indicators. So things we can measure in decibels. 1/3. So that leaves 2/3 for the non-acoustic factors. So these are very important for in our experience of sound, the outcomes of sound for our noise annoyance. And they're starting to be documented. So there aren't standards on these yet, but that process is just starting so that people use consistent language. So we can understand the personal factors, noise tolerance, ability to cope with the noise, perceived fear or perceived control. Tangible factors, so they're to do with us. They stay with us, the personal factors. The tangible factors are also called environmental factors. Sometimes the people say visual modifiers. So we know that people are less annoyed by road traffic noise if they're looking at trees. It's less annoying if they have access to green space close by. Psychosocial factors, perceived fairness, community benefit or disbenefit from a noise. Think about the difference in the way you respond to the sound of a car alarm or an ambulance siren. Sounds are similar, the response is quite different. So where do we start on these with open plan offices? Well, lots of work's already been done on this. We don't have to start from scratch again. If we look at personality types, I don't know if you can read that, the dotted line is extroverted people, and the solid line and points are introverted people. So extroverted people are more satisfied in open plan offices at both allocated and unallocated desks. They're more comfortable with more noise. Both types of people are less satisfied at allocated desks compared to unallocated desks. So maybe that's the control factor coming back in again. So we can't design for everybody's personality, but we can design spaces that cater for all our divergent needs, or be honest about the fact that we're not designing for everyone's divergent needs. People's personal need for privacy. And this study validated this model that demonstrated people's personal need for privacy affected their perceived fit of an activity in a particular work setting, and that affected both their task performance and their satisfaction with the environment. It's an entirely personal factor. Again, we just need to design to cater for the people that we have in the office that we're designing. People come with experience and expectations. We're never a blank sheet of paper, are we, or a blank slate. So people in private offices prefer the idea of private offices, and they rate all other types of work settings less favourably than people who are in them. When people move to open plan offices and then move to activity-based working offices, they would never go back again. They prefer the new settings. We're creatures of habit, we're afraid of change. It always invokes fear. So it's always a journey, a change of workplace setting. That journey needs to be managed very carefully because it affects the comfort that we have in the new setting. You can see this as a psychosocial factor. If you believed that the change in the workplace setting was for the better, people felt more comfortable in it 12 months after the move. And if you didn't believe it, you felt less comfortable. Why don't we take that into account in our acoustic design? That's part of the acoustic design. It affects the acoustic outcomes. Another case study. In this office, they said, can you come and help us improve the acoustics in this office? So we did similar things again. We measured the room acoustic parameters. There was a Class A ceiling, so that gave us kind of what we expected. And we did occupied measurements at these 4 places. And the measurements really confirmed what we observed. So over here, the liveliness is it's fairly tranquil. So most people in this office are doing individual work most of the time. A few phone calls, a little bit of interaction, but not much interaction. Over here, it's much more lively. That's just because the people who choose to sit at this desk, these desks, like to chat a lot more. They're more comfortable talking while they do the same sort of work as other people. So the answer here was to some acoustic space planning for those particular people. They needed a protected area of the office so they didn't impact on the other people who didn't want to hear them chat so much. Could we have predicted that? Could we have picked that up in any sort of design process? I don't think so. I think this is learning how to use an office, which people always need to do. If an office is a tool, then we give it to people, we hand it over, then they work out what to do with it. We can help them work out how to use it better. Always, I think. We can always improve the acoustics in any operating office by talking to them, finding out what they need. We did the noise comfort questionnaire, and that showed that telephones ringing was a big cause of annoyance in this office as well. So the answer there was to, and because these desks were used as a contact center for certain times. So the answer there was to turn off the ringtones and use lights or something else. Telephones don't need to ring these days, do they? So we need to change the narrative for acoustic satisfaction, because room acoustic satisfaction doesn't exist in the room. It only exists in people's minds. We need to address the people. We need to take the people with us on the journey. We need to find out what they need. So we can design for acoustic satisfaction. I'm not sure that AI will be able to replace you doing this job quite yet. But we need to take people seriously. We need to design for the range of things that they do, for their needs, for the people, for these particular offices that we're designing. We need to give them control. We don't yet know what that range of control looks like, what type of spaces people might need, the level of access to them that makes them viable. But we need to do this because otherwise we'll be obsolete as acousticians, because if we only talk about the room acoustics, we're only talking about a small part of the things that affect the acoustic outcomes. We still need the room acoustics, but we won't be calculating that, will we? And the acoustic space planning. And everything we do needs to be in the context of our sustainability crisis. We can't afford to keep creating workplaces that don't work for the people there. It's just a waste of our resources. We can't afford to do that anymore. Thank you very much.